again, my lovelies, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are back with Locked in Digital, and thank you for all the patience you had as I went out abroad to meet some friends. It was great, but we forgot to get any photos, unfortunately, so maybe next year we'll get more photos. On another note, today's trigger warnings only include hallucinations and Im- uh, of images of blood and gore. Nothing else! Seems like there's going to be fun. Now let's go in to chapter 9 of Locked in Digital. I hope you grabbed yourself some snackation, some hydration, and then sat back and relaxed, as you deserve it, and don't forget, hydrate or die straight. Locked in Digital. Written by RogueDruid Icarius51. Read by Tilir. Chapter 9. Respawn, Die, Repeat. As All Might stared at the screen, tapping the commands to have the recovery bots come to collect Ida, he reviewed what he had just watched as the students behind him whispered and gossiped about the same. Young Midoriya was an enigma, and his actions were inconsistent with what All Might had been warned of. His actions and techniques were refined, yes, but he had shown no real drive or intention to end the fight at the start. The counting of how many times he could have eliminated his opponents at the start was terrifying. Just at the start of the match, could have been ended instantly, but instead the teen had playfully unnerved his opponents. All Might's trained eye and combat experience also showed through at the realization that many of Midoriya's tricks and traps and surprises went largely unused. The coils of rope, the open windows, even the birds, a distraction, had been fairly useless in the long run. Young Midoriya, please escort Ida to the front of the building. A transport to the infirmary and recovery girl's attention should see him back at the class soon enough. Understood. The curt and monotone reply made All Might's skin crawl. Where was the joy, the expression of interest that was evident in the teen's action, but not in his voice? It was simply unnatural. On the screen, Midoriya grabbed the taller teen's arm and pulled Ida close, hooking the teen's arm around his shoulders and bracing as he assisted the speedster to the first floor. Or maybe, All Might mused to himself, sharp eyes catching a building tension in Izuku's frame from the contact. It's far more natural for him to keep people away than anyone could expect. At the bottom, Tokoyami was still pinned, trying to get Dark Shadow enough leverage to yank the knives free. The quirk was grumbling, shifting and twisting to grab the knives, but since couldn't brace against his companion as he normally would, it was unable to move the knives to come free. As footsteps approached, the raven-headed teen looked to see Midoriya supporting his comrade, whose armor looked cracked and had lolled somewhat, as opposed to his once perfect posture. What happened to him? Tokoyami asked as he passed by. Tripwire and the stairwell. Realizing that was likely the crashing sound the raven-haired teen had heard earlier, he nodded and laid back down. When he's taken care of, would you be so kind? The sentence was cut off as out of the stairwell, Koda glanced down the hall, stony head scratched at sheepishly and a large rat on his shoulder. I can help. Midoriya glanced back from where he neared the doorway and nodded, pulled towards his feet and up. With that, the two armored teens left the building. A few minutes of getting his grip and figuring out how to crouch to get the right leverage, and the knife slowly came loose, jerking up and being set down nearby. Thank you for the assistance, animal speaker. Tokoyami nodded, Dark Shadow shaking its head in thanks as well. The rocky teen grinned and rubbed his neck before looking up as Midoriya strode through the front entrance and back down the hallway by himself. The tall red boots silent and black cloth hanging down from around his shoulders swaying. As he approached, his hands came up as if to sign before he glanced at Tokoyami and spoke instead. Koda, I'm gonna gather my remaining supplies back. Say thanks to the birds for me, and sorry they didn't get to perform their act. The monotone voice was soft and careful, even as the teen crouched and picked up his knives, a smooth motion sliding them behind his back under the loose cloak he still wore, tucked into hidden sheaths in the small of his back. As he strode past, Tokoyami spoke up, picking up the discarded red plastic flare that had burned out only a minute before the match. Thank you for the match. It was quite illuminating. As Izuku glanced back, lips twitching, a hint of humor in his eyes. Any time. With that, the wraith-like figure wandered up the stairs. Koda blinked and tilted his head. Was Was that a pun? Tokoyami merely gave a slow blink before he walked away as Dark Shadow giggled inside his cloak. Izuku breathed deep as he collected the loop ropes from around the top floor and pulled a small crowbar from his pouch to recover the pythons that held them ready. Back window escape route, main stairwell rapid descent, the 5th to 3rd floor rappel rope, tripwires 1 to 5, snare hoops, anchor cord for 2nd floor landing. Checking off the rope lengths and locations in his mind, he slid the last python back in his pocket before pulling one of the 2 knives he used to pin Tokoyami. The tip was deformed from the impact, and the top third of the blade had been warped and dulled by slamming it into concrete. Sadly, he had expected this. Just like his blade was rough and poor quality, these had been cheap acquisitions, more from random junk shops and novelty stores than actual bladesmiths. He was more surprised that they hadn't snapped under the force he subjected them to. He would have to requisition more blades from Hatsume. God, he missed that parrying dagger he had picked up in New Londo. It had been extremely useful as a backup until he broke it off in Havel's eye. His eyes closed in remembrance, and he could almost feel it. The long walk through the undead burg to the outer wall, avoiding archers and firebombs while slaying dozens of undead. He had rested at the top of the tower below where he had defeated the Taurus demon and the path of Solaire's perch. And then he had descended the empty tower, passing through storerooms until he reached the bottom floor, where Havel, the massive knight who wielded a dragon's fang as a club, awaited him. The fight had been brutal, and when his blade, one of the many long swords in the realm, had snapped under a poorly blocked hit from the fang, Izuku had acted on desperate impulse. He still remembered the feeling of the blade sliding through his helmet-slitted face, cutting off Havel's chuckle of victory. He could hear the scream of pain as his desperate last trick struck home, the sound and feel of the blade snapping as the knight had reared back, the club swinging wildly and knocking Izuku against the wall, caving in his latest breastplate and breaking bones, but not quite fatal enough to keep him down. He remembered a sense of satisfaction as the shattered longsword he had kept hold of had slid past the knight's heavy armor, sneaking up under the arm, raised to his face and into the knight's heart. He also remembered leaving the bloody and far too heavy remains of Habel and his armor to rust and fade, only taking his ring as a sign of victory. Breathing out in a sharp exhale, Izuku stood, tossing the knife in his hand up and catching it absently as he returned. He had wasted enough time here. There were more fights to watch, and he expected the fighters from last match would return soon, all but Kachan having been sent to the infirmary to get patched up before his match had begun. However, as he strode out the front door of the building, knives and gear all stowed, he was met with a surprise. Friday night, 3. Time 12:06 a.m. Freddy, death count 44.
Hello? Hello? Hey, you're doing great. Most people don't last this long. I mean, they usually move on to other things by now. I'm not implying that they died. That's not what I meant. Yeah, anyway, I better not take up too much of your time. This thing's starting to get real tonight. Um, hey, listen, I had an idea. If you happen to get caught and want to avoid getting stuffed into a Freddy suit, try playing that.
Izuku reached back and tapped the receiver, the voicemail cutting off as he shoved the myriad of crumpled papers and ads from the desk to the floor. Sorry, phone buddy, but I've heard you say that way too much. He finished clearing the desk and he reached out. The mirror mounted on the wall was lifted and he held it, glancing at the deep bags under his eyes. He could see in the reflection and the fact his hair was slightly longer. It's been what? A month? I need to check next time I die. He set the mirror against the wall behind him, angled to let him see down the left hallway from the desk. The posters were ripped down next, and Izuku tossed them in the trash can, whistling as he reached out and tapped the right door control and shut it on Chica's face. With that done, he stood and stretched before the desk, and he held out his hand and spoke clearly. Notebook! A flicker of light and a leather-bound notebook landed in his hand, and he slammed it onto the table with gusto, flipping it open to a pair of pages covered in math, a sketch of the rooms and a list of times and events. The bottom left corner was stained by rust-colored splatters. Alright, let's go, you mechanical fox! Izuku growled as he unplugged the fan from the wall, lips twitching as a smile formed. I want to play. In the darkness beyond the office, the animatronics moved to meet him. Bakugo leaned against the wall, hands clenching and flexing as he fed more sweat into the cylinders around his wrists, topping off his ammo. Some of that sweat was from the anxious churning in his gut as he watched his childhood friend tear his opponents apart. Grace, skills, weapon, tactics, everything Katsuki once considered to be things he was unmatched at. And for what? And for years he was right. But he had watched the streams, found highlights of the various games and more well-known bits of Izuku's imprisonment. From the compilations of him outrunning Slender in the early days to the far more well-known Outlast final run. Katsuki knew that the Watchers, as they called themselves, was a fairly small community in the grand scheme of things. But once they realized that Izuku felt and lived through every game, they had dedicated forums and videos to breaking down tactics and skills, to hunting up dog-eared hunting up dog-eared 200-year-old game maps and playthroughs, hoping and waiting until they could help the runner in the games. After Game 4, they got their chance. Bakugo remembers dozens of hours where he was sitting staring at a screen, much like today, and when that gate opened, when the video stream of Izuku, face pale and exhausted, eyes manic and with bags so deep and dark they looked black, stared out from the screen. He also remembers the messages he typed but never sent. What could he say in the end, even if he didn't know? Regardless, Bakugo watched as two of the hero students made their way into the control room to Murmurs. All Might turned to the two students and an eyebrow arched in confusion. "Ha! Young Koda, where is your partner?" Koda opened his mouth to answer before Tokoyami cut in. "Midoriya-san is currently recovering the gear he used to trap and prepare the room," he stated. He stated he would only take a minute or two. The teacher nodded and glanced at the cameras, while Katsuki mimicked him, seeing only a glimpse as Deku walked off one screen onto another, passing outside. "Hey! Takayami, right?" The voice was excited and brash, and Bakugo glanced over to the spiky red hair as another teen walked up to the cloaked crow guy. "Indeed. And you are Kirishima, correct?" "Ha! Yeah! Anyways, I was wondering how the hell you lost that fight, man. I mean, your quirk is really flashy and cool, and he ripped right through it. Did he use his quirk to counter yours or something?" As the crow seemed to shuffle awkwardly, Katsuki let out a snort of derision. "Nerd doesn't have a quirk. That was sheer skill and experience." The rest of the class turned towards him in confusion before the door opened once more, and the dangerous nerd in question walked through, eyebrow quirked in an expression of amusement, mainly at the small hawk perched on his armored shoulder, glancing around. Honestly, Izuku didn't know or really care why most of them were looking at him like that. Was it the hawk on his arm? You'd think that would be pretty low on the list of weird occurrences. Or maybe his internal scale was just fucked up more than he thought. Bringing his arms up, careful not to disrupt the hawk, he signed to Koda. "It seems I've picked up a hitchhiker. Would you ask why he stuck around?" Koda blinked and walked to Izuku's side, voice dropping as he started talking to the hawk, the larger teen's natural height putting him just a few inches taller than the bird. While that happened, the rest of the class seemed to be frozen in a state of confusion and hesitation. Katsuki was the only one who seemed to be really willing to talk, but seemed too preoccupied with smirking and watching the rest of the class. Great. Now he was gonna have to solve the mystery by himself. "Are you really quirkless?" Izuku gave a slow, languid blink. As he turned his head, he ignored the sudden bloodstains on the walls and the sound of a corpse hitting the floor as he focused. The voice came from a tall, sophisticated-looking girl from across the room, black hair spiked out behind her head as gray eyes assessed the teen. "I am. Is that a problem for you?" He was calm. You could even describe him as monotone. The blood that rushed down his fingertips was fake, nothing but an afterthought. "I'm more curious as to where a quirkless teenager managed to pick up more refined skills than most heroes I've met." Izuku let his heart rate pulse faster, let his reins slip looser just for a second, just to give him the clarity and freedom to really transmit his thoughts. He slowly stretched his mouth into a bright and cheerful smile, his eyes closing as he let it stretch just a bit too wide, a bit too sharp. Even though his lash, even through his lashes, he could see the faces pale, the eyes blink in confusion, and bodies shift in unease. Why, I learned from experience. His voice was sharper and higher pitched, snarkier, a bit of bite, of venom and sarcastic glee. He let his emotions leak for just a second before his smile faded like mist in the morning sun, his green eyes gleaming dark as his heart rate slowed once more. That enough of an explanation. He watched with careful eyes Yaoyorozu slowly and deliberately swallowed before she nodded once. He had to give it to her. She hid her fear well. Yes, I apologize for overstepping my grounds. The rest of the class seemed to be ready to fall into a half-terrified silence before All Might cleared his throat, clearly not having expected being ignored.
Well then, since most of our teams are here this round, let's review.
Tuning out All Might as he began to speak to the rest of the class about the fight, but keeping enough awareness to follow along, Izuku's eyes glanced to Koda, whose hands sighed a few short sentences that explained the situation. Young bird, curious of you. Calls you the human raptor, I guess? Wants to learn from you by watching. Offers to provide a pair of eyes. Will assist me as well. Izuku gave another slow blink, one that conveyed curiosity and consideration, before shifting his eyes to meet the sharp gaze of the raptor still on his shoulder, before his hands signed back. Tell him sure, but he'll need to practice with us later. Koda seemed taken aback somewhat, but nodded before leaning in to whisper to the bird. Izuku made a mental note to ask what type of bird and what types of food and needs it would want from them.
MVP of the match?
The class shifted and murmured before a girl with deep purple hair and earphone-looking lines of her ears raised her hand.
Yes, Jiro-san?
I would assume it's Midoriya. He was on top and focused on the enemy team the entire match. The only reason why he wouldn't be the MVP is that he didn't go for those kill shots early on. Speaking softly, so softly he doubted even Koda at his side could easily hear, Izuku gave her a hint. What would a fight that ends fast teach? His eyes caught Chiro's tense shoulders and the flinch from a taller masked teen with 6 shifting arms across the room. Curious, too, with hearing that caught that. Regardless, All Might was already breathing in to speak.
Well said, young Jiro. Midoriya was indeed directly in control of almost the entire match, and Koda performed his support role quite well. You could not hear it, sadly, but young Koda took out the lights and was providing information and scouting via his animal companions.
As the class muttered and spoke in understanding, Koda shifted under the occasional glances while Izuku shifted his arms up, the hawk leaping to his gauntleted arm and then up to Koda's shoulder. The presence of an animal companion almost instantly seemed to calm Izuku's team weight from agitated to simply uneasy. As the class moved on, Izuku watched as the paired teams began to leave. He slid a small pocket book from his pocket, flipping it open and glancing at the matchups he had marked down earlier. Meso Shochi and Mineta Minoru, defending against Aoyama Yuga and Asui Suyu. Following that would be Yaoyorozu Momo and Jiro Kyoka against Sato Rikido and Zero Hanta. The final match would be Uraraka Ochako and Kirishima Eiichiro against Ochiro Mashiaro and Kaminari Denki. Flipping to a clean page, Izuku kicked a foot back to rest against the wall and sat on the heel of his boot, knee up as a desk, as he focused. He watched the screens, the current group using the same building Izuku and Koda had. With a slow breath, he let himself diffuse his attention, eyes only flickering to focus when something was important on the monitors. He ignored the sound of children's music that began to softly play, haunting his thoughts. Freddy, night 3. Time 4:36 a.m. Freddy death count 44. Still relaxed, but still. Don't move. Don't blink. Don't shift. Izuku's eyes watched while he kept his heartbeat slow. 3, 2, 1. Izuku rolled out from under the dining room booth table and leaped behind the marching Bonnie and darting forwards to grab the last instrument off the stage before the animatronic could turn to him and vaulting from the stage to another table before skidding around the corner and darting back down the hall into the office, grinning as he eyed his collection resting under the phone. He had stolen all their instruments, and he had plenty of time left. He checked the camera quickly. All right, 23% and an hour left. Yeah, that'll work. He sat on the desk chair and breathed deeply. He knew he was insane. That he was being stupid setting these goals for himself. But the rush, the emotion was wonderful. The adrenaline of facing them, the rush of accomplishing something after so long. Even as he reached out, his hand hit the button to close the door, only the faintest form of Bonnie's angry mechanical expression visible as the barrier slammed shut. Izuku giggled. He was running on euphoria, but he could tell things would get worse soon. Phone guy was nervous in the day 3 message, and Izuku was getting bad vibes about tomorrow. And that was not even considering how strained, how weird Izuku's mind felt anymore. The long up to 6-hour sessions, the stress, the constant state of alertness, he was changing. And he wasn't sure how it would end. Hello again, my lovelies, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are back with Locked in Digital, and thank you for all the patience you had as I went out abroad to meet some friends. It was great, but we forgot to get any photos, unfortunately, so maybe next year we'll get more photos. On another note, today's trigger warnings only include hallucinations and Im- uh, of images of blood and gore. Nothing else! Seems like there's going to be fun. Now let's go in to chapter 9 of Locked in Digital. I hope you grabbed yourself some snackation, some hydration, and then sat back and relaxed, as you deserve it, and don't forget, hydrate or die straight.